It's a new year, a new day, and I've just got one question for you. Do you feel that you're living up to your full potential? Today, we're going to be talking about answering your calling. Are you ready? Then let's get to the show. Welcome to the Yes to You podcast, where we empower women to manifest their vision of happiness and success with down-to-earth practical guidance for conscious living, personal growth, and entrepreneurship. Our goal is to see you take inspired action by saying yes to your calling. I'm your host and founder of RohiniWellness.com, Dominique D. Wilson. And now, let's get into the topic of the hour. Welcome to the very first episode of the Yes to You podcast. I cannot begin to express to you how excited I am about this very moment because this podcast has literally been a dream of mine for several years, and who knew that 2019 would be the year that we are making things happen. So woohoo! Thank you so much for joining me. Today I want to talk about answering your calling. But before I dive into today's topic, I want to take a minute to just briefly introduce myself, just in case we haven't met before this episode. My name is Dominique D. Wilson, and I'm the founder of RohiniWellness.com, which is a holistic wellness company that has a mission of empowering women to love themselves, lead with purpose, and live their dream. As a trauma-informed Reiki master teacher, speaker, and intuitive guide, I help women to transform their emotional pain into purpose so that they can manifest their vision of happiness and success. Now, when I'm not with a client writing a blog or creating a podcast, I am also a wife. I'm a homeschooling mom of two beautiful little boys. I am a musician as well. I've been a musician my entire life, but my absolute favorite instrument to play is the guitar. I also sing and write my own music, and I'm a vegan/vegetarian. I kind of bounce between the two depending on how I'm feeling in the moment. Finally, I love to travel and just get outdoors. So that's just a little bit about me. Next, I want to tell you about this podcast and kind of what you can expect. So right now we are in season 1, and this is going to run from now, January of 2019, all the way up to about mid-March. And it'll be just me delivering as much value as I can to help you create a powerful vision for your life and then move forward and start executing that vision so that you can move powerfully in the direction of your purpose. Then around mid-March or so, I will be kicking off season 2 with some pretty amazing interviews. I'm going to bring some very powerful women on the podcast to share their wisdom, their insight, and their stories of the things that have worked for them and a little bit of their process so that you can get even more value around the topics of conscious living, personal growth, and entrepreneurship. So looking down the road, that's a little bit of what you can expect from this podcast. And hey, we'll see where it goes from there. Body, mind, spirit. This is your weekly wellness tip. The topic of today's wellness tip is mental health. Did you know that according to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, over 40 million U.S. adults will face mental illness this year? And I want you to keep in mind that that projection is just based upon the number of individuals who are actually willing and able to self-report. The bottom line is that mental health is just as important as physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health. I'd like to share a few things with you that you can do on a day-to-day basis to maintain your mental health. I want to preface this by saying if you find yourself in crisis, don't ever hesitate to call 911, and also be sure to check the show notes. I'll be including some additional resources and some ideas on how to approach mental wellness from a holistic perspective. So the first thing that you can do to maintain your mental well-being on a day-to-day basis is to adopt a mindfulness-based practice such as yoga, deep breathing, meditation. Did you know that these are actually evidence-based ways to process trauma, to handle stress, and to support your brain and nervous system in literally making you more resilient? I offer a free 15-minute guided meditation called the Inner Guidance Meditation. You can find that at bit.ly/IG meditation, and I will link that in the show notes. This is a great way for you to ground yourself, do some deep breathing relaxation to connect with your inner wisdom and also your intuition. So that's just another resource for you. The second thing that you can do is to unplug. Take those last few hours, especially before bed, to unplug and give yourself a chance to process all of your experiences and emotions that you've had throughout the day. A lot of times we pick up on ambient stress that we're not even aware of because we're bombarded with so much information, and you may not realize that your stress level is subtly increasing. Unplugging gives you a chance to stop taking in so much stimuli so that you can be with you and see how amazing that is. The third thing that you can do is to get moving. The best way to get out of your head is to get into your body. Any type of movement that you can do for at least 30 minutes 3 times a week is really going to help you to be more resilient, to be able to process stress in a healthy way. It's going to support your body's physical detoxification process. You'll sleep better, and again, you'll be able to respond to and process stress in a way that is more healthy and more empowering for you. The fourth and final tip is to get more sleep. If you're not getting at least 6 hours of sleep a day, you're probably not giving your body the chance that it needs to fully detox, to replenish, and to refresh you so that you can start the next day on a high note. Not getting enough sleep definitely increases your stress level. It decreases your ability to be resilient because you just don't have the energy reserves. It also has been linked to things like anxiety, depression. So do yourself a favor and get more sleep. And here's the great thing. The other 3 tips I just shared with you are going to actually help you get more sleep. So definitely take advantage of these simple things that you can do on a day-to-day basis to maintain your mental well-being. And now, back to the show. As I mentioned earlier, today we're going to be talking about answering your calling. But first, I want to share a few thoughts on this idea of purpose. There's a lot of talk today about purpose, and it almost can seem like there's one specific thing that we should be focused on, and once you find that one career, you should follow that, and that is it. However, I disagree with that model just a little bit. I believe that purpose is something that evolves with us over time, and that the more you continue to go on through your journey, you get a bit more of a glimpse of what that purpose is. So therefore, I have one question for you. Do you know what you are called to do? Now, if you haven't quite figured that out just yet, that's okay. Today, I want to share with you 3 tips that have been absolutely helpful and tremendous for me in terms of being able to understand what my calling is and how all of those experiences play a role in that and integrate that into the work that I'm doing now and that I continue to do. Tip number 1 is to love yourself fiercely. I want to share a quick story with you about how this came about. Several years ago, I went through a divorce, and it was a very devastating time for me, but at the same time, it was also very transformational. And looking back, I give thanks for that experience. But at the beginning, it was very painful because, you see, everything that I thought I knew about the nature of life, about love, and about myself came crashing down. And for the first time in many, many years, I was forced to take a hard look at myself to try and figure out who I was and what it is that I wanted out of life, independently of anybody else. I spent so many years in a relationship that my entire identity had kind of become wrapped around or dependent on, if you will, that relationship. My vision was all about what we were going to do, and all of my hopes and dreams were kind of attached to the other person. So I lost a bit of myself. Looking back now, I know that that experience was necessary for me to wake up and realize that I came into this life to do something, not to hide behind my relationship or another person. So how did I get out of that? Well, when I first started out, I was very emotional, of course, but what I started to do was journaling. Every day I began writing, and for the first few weeks, it was pretty much just flushing out emotions, because if you can imagine, I had quite a few of them. I was angry, I was sad, I was hurt, I felt resentful. I mean, you name it, I felt the whole gamut. After a few weeks of getting those things out, I noticed that my writing began to evolve. My journaling became more of this dialogue between me and my higher self. And that's where the insights and the wisdom started to pour through. And I was actually able to start looking at the divorce, looking at my relationship, and looking at all the different experiences and things in my life and seeing what was really going on. What was the lesson in that for me? And how did that make me better? So I got this idea in my head that maybe I could create a vision of my ideal partner and think about how they would treat me, how they spoke to me, how I felt when I was around them. And then I decided to become that, to embody that. And from then on, I began a very beautiful journey of holistic self-care. This was taking care of my body, mind, and spirit every single day. I'm talking eating well. I became a vegan raw foodist, which was super hardcore, but hey, I was feeling it in the moment. And that was exactly what I needed at that time. And it was great. I took my spiritual baths every day. I did my prayer, my meditation. And then I started to create these amazing self-care products for myself out of natural oils and herbs and butters and clays. And I would bring together all these things. I made candles and incense. I even made products for my hair. I started to make all kinds of cosmetics. These were just things that I made almost as gifts to myself to assist in this daily holistic self-care routine that I had created. And without realizing it, between the self-care and the journaling and the spiritual work I was doing, something in me started to shift. There was a spark, a light. Other people started to come up to me and ask me, hey, what are you doing? Your hair looks great. Or your skin looks great. There's something different about you. What's going on? So I started to share with them a little bit about what I had gone through and where I was at in my journey, just focusing on me, taking care of myself and being as kind to myself as possible. And all I could think about was, man, I wish I could tell other people about this. I wish I could somehow show other women how to do this for themselves, because there's a lot of people out there hurting. And going through divorce is a terrible, terrible thing, but there's so many other terrible things that people go through, all kinds of traumas. And if they knew how to cultivate this energy, this thing that I've stumbled on for themselves, it would make a monumental shift. So from there, I began to share my products with other people. And in 2014, I started my first business. It was a little Etsy shop where I offered a few of my products for sale. And I realized that I needed to communicate a little bit more because I couldn't really get a big message across with a bath salt or a body scrub. I needed to speak and I needed to write. So I started to blog and create video content to share the message behind how the products I was creating were tools that could be used in a daily holistic self-care routine to empower yourself and to cultivate self-love from within. Although I spent so many years of my life feeling disjointed from what I was really supposed to be doing and trying to just figure out what am I here for, this theme of building community around empowering women started to come through. I'm telling you this because my first tip was to love yourself fiercely. That is the very first step, because in order to answer your calling, you have to accept what you bring to the table. And what you bring to the table is you. Your hopes, your dreams, your gifts, your strengths, all of that, your personality, all your quirks, that is so valuable. There's nothing about you that is too small or that is minuscule or that is not important. Everything that you are, especially all of your experiences, no matter what you've been through, is valuable, and it's made you into this masterpiece who you are today. So love yourself fiercely. Tip number 2 to answer your calling is to own your story. When you own your story, that's literally looking at all your experiences, no matter how much adversity you've been through, and seeing it as on the way rather than being in the way. Seeing it as on the way is becoming a bit of a prospector, right? What does a prospector do? They go out and they dig and they look for gems and gold and things like that. So owning your story is being able to look at your experiences and see how they've increased your empathy, Now you can look someone else in the eye who is going through the same thing that you've been through, and you know exactly what they're feeling. You know what that look on their face is. You know what's going through their head. You know how to get out of it and to where you are now. That's the real value in being able to own your story. When you own your story, you know that your purpose is so much bigger than just you. Tip number 3 is simple. Say yes to your calling. The way to say yes to your calling is to simply be willing to take inspired action when you feel that desire in your heart to do something, when you feel like I should write a book about XYZ, or maybe I should start a blog, or you know what, I really want to give a speech on that. Later, what often comes is the but, right? And we can talk ourselves out of our own greatness. Sometimes we hide behind feeling that we're not ready. I need to get another certification. Maybe I should go back to school, or let me just read one more book or listen to one more webinar and then I'll do it. But when it comes to answering your calling, I want you to know that 50% of your clarity, which is really what we're all waiting for, we want that clarity so that we know what we're going to do, where it's going to go, and clarity makes us feel safe. But only 50% of that comes from what you absorb, from what you know. The other 50% of the clarity that you are looking for comes from experiential knowledge, from putting yourself out there and taking action. It's almost like you take one step forward and then the next step on the path is illuminated for you. But until you take that step forward, it's just kind of like darkness or cloudiness. You don't really know. So always remember that when your heart calls you to do something, when your desire is pulling you forward in that direction, give yourself permission to listen to that and take inspired action. For me, taking inspired action after I went through that healing process looked like opening an Etsy shop. Something very simple, very low barrier to entry. You know, all I had to do was put my products online, create a few descriptions, throw some pictures up, and see where it went from there. Who knew that I would end up with my own website, my own blog, that I would start speaking, building a community of women through my email list on social media. I now have a Facebook group called the I Am Sacred Beauty Women's Healing Circle. I am also now launching this podcast. And so it literally is just one step after another. And this all started with a light bulb in my head coming on and me deciding to do something about it, starting with me. So when you move from that place of self-love, when you tap into your story, when you accept all of who and what you are, and when you follow your inspiration and give yourself permission to put one foot in front of the other and take inspired action towards your purpose, you never know what will come from that. You never know who out there is waiting to hear from you. Because maybe 100 people have told them the same thing, and for some reason they can't hear it. It's not helping them to have the breakthrough. But there's something about the way you said it on that video you recorded. Or there's something about the way you wrote it in that book that you wrote. Or the way you typed it in the blog post. There's something about the way that you said it when you looked them in the eye that created a shift for them. I want you to think about that. Think about the impact of your presence when you decide to take inspired action. Now here's something really cool. Those 3 tips I just shared with you, I have formed into a motto, and they actually came out of that journaling process that I was just telling you about a few moments ago. And so the actual complete motto is this: you get to choose how you show up in life. Love yourself fiercely, own your story, and say yes to your calling. As a very special thanks to our founding listeners, we are doing a giveaway. All you have to do is go to iTunes and leave us a review, or share this episode on social media using hashtag #YesToYou, and you'll be entered to win something amazing for your body, mind, and spirit. So that's going to do it for today. I hope you stick around for the next episode because you won't want to miss what we're going to talk about. We are going to be diving into how to create a bold vision for your inspired life. It was a pleasure to have you join us for this episode of the Yes to You podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to visit rohiniwellness.com/vision to download my free PDF starter guide, the Create Your Vision Workbook. If this episode was helpful for you, please leave us a review on iTunes. Also, when you share this episode on social media using hashtag #YesToYou, we'll give you a shout out on a future episode. We look forward to inspiring you next time, right here on the Yes to You podcast.